Story number 1. The Shadow Behind the Mirror, Finland, 2007. I still wake up in the dead of night. The memory of that stormy winter drive in 2007 gnawing at my consciousness like the relentless rain that once battered the desolate roads of Finland. My name is Michael Virtanen, and the haunting events that unfolded on that rainy night remain etched in my soul. A constant reminder of the thin line between reality and the supernatural. It was late December, the heart of winter, when I decided to make the long drive home from a late shift at the factory. The roads were slick with rain, the icy grip of winter making every mile a cautious endeavor. I had taken this route countless times, but that night, something felt different. An unsettling tension that hung in the air, amplified by the fierce storm raging outside. As I navigated the winding roads of northern Finland, the rhythmic hum of my engine and the steady beat of raindrops against the windshield provided a comforting backdrop to my solitary journey. The landscape outside was a monochrome blur of dark clouds, treetops heavy with rain, and the occasional flash of lightning illuminating the desolate beauty of the Finnish wilderness. About an hour into my drive, I approached a familiar bridge that spanned a narrow river cutting through the forest. The bridge was old, its wooden planks slick with rain and its railings worn by countless winters. It was a shortcut I often took to shave off a few minutes from my commute. A small convenience that made the long drive bearable. As I reached the midpoint of the bridge, a piercing screech echoed through the storm, followed by the rapid flash of headlights speeding past me. My heart skipped a beat, the sound jolting me from my thoughts. I glanced in my rearview mirror, expecting to see a reckless driver struggling against the storm. But there was nothing, no car, no movement, just the relentless rain and the dark expanse of the night. Shaking off the eerie feeling, I continued driving, the storm's fury unabated. Minutes passed without incident, but the unease lingered, like a shadow hovering just out of sight. I tried to focus on the road ahead, the tires gripping the slippery surface. But every so often, my eyes darted to the rearview mirror, half expecting to catch another glimpse of that mysterious car. It wasn't until I was halfway home that I noticed it. A faint silhouette sitting in the passenger seat behind me. My breath caught in my throat as I froze, staring at the mirror in disbelief. The figure was cloaked in darkness, barely distinguishable from the shadows that danced with the storm's fury. His eyes, however, were unmistakable. Empty voids staring directly at me with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. Panic surged through me as I reached for the steering wheel, my mind racing to rationalize the impossible. Was it a trick of the light? A hallucination brought on by exhaustion and the storm's relentless assault? But the eyes in the mirror were too real, too hollow to dismiss as mere imagination. Heart pounding, I decided to confront the apparition. I pulled over to the side of the bridge, the rain lashing against the windows as I reached for the door handle. Taking a deep breath, I opened the passenger door, the cold wind whipping around me like an invisible force. The passenger seat was empty, the figure gone without a trace, leaving only the lingering sense of being watched. I slammed the door shut, my hands trembling as I glanced back at the mirror. The shadowy figure had vanished, but the oppressive feeling remained, a heavy weight pressing down on me. I couldn't shake the image of those empty eyes, the silent plea that seemed to echo in the storm's roar. Desperate for answers, I decided to retrace my steps, to see if I could find any clue that might explain the haunting presence. I drove back towards the bridge, the storm showing no signs of relenting, the rain now a relentless barrage that made visibility near zero. The road ahead was a blur of white and shadow, each flash of lightning revealing nothing but the endless expanse of rain-soaked darkness. As I approached the bridge once more, a strange phenomenon occurred. The lights of my dashboard began to flicker, the engine sputtering as if struggling against an unseen force. My breath visible in the frigid air. I felt a surge of fear gripping me, the storm's fury now intertwined with the supernatural terror that plagued me. Suddenly, the passenger seat began to glow with an ethereal light. the rain outside momentarily pausing as if time itself had stilled. The silhouette reappeared, more defined this time, standing just inches away from the open door. His eyes met mine in the mirror, the same hollow gaze that had frozen me in place earlier. "Help me," a voice whispered, barely audible over the storm's rage. I recoiled, my instincts screaming at me to flee, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and desperation. The figure remained silent, his presence overwhelming, the air around us thick with sorrow and longing. The storm outside intensified, the rain now a torrential downpour that seemed to echo the turmoil within me. I realized then that this was no ordinary apparition. It was a restless spirit, trapped in a loop of his final moments, forever seeking help that was never given. Summoning every ounce of courage, I decided to break the cycle, to offer the assistance he so desperately sought. "What do you need?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He slowly extended his hand, the gesture both pleading and desperate. "Find my family," he whispered, his voice filled with anguish. "We were lost in the storm, trapped here." The room seemed to pulse with an unseen energy, the storm's fury now merging with the spectral presence that stood before me. Images flashed through my mind, visions of a family driving through the storm, the terror of being lost, the agony of losing loved ones to the unforgiving winter night. "I'll help you," I vowed, my determination overriding my fear. "I'll find your family." As the words left my lips, the figure began to fade, his form dissolving into the storm like mist on a cold morning. The oppressive weight lifted, the rain subsiding to a gentle drizzle that painted the world in shades of gray. The mirror no longer reflected his hollow eyes, only the lingering remnants of the storm's passage. I knew then that my journey was far from over. The spirit's plea had ignited a mission within me, a quest to uncover the truth behind the tragedy that had bound his soul to Highway 491. Days turned into weeks as I delved into old records, interviewing locals and piecing together the fragmented stories of lost travelers who had vanished into the storm without a trace. The more I learned, the more I realized the extent of the highway's dark legacy. Tales of vanished drivers, unexplained phenomena, and restless spirits became a haunting refrain that echoed through the small town. It was as if Highway 491 was a gateway to another realm, a place where the living and the dead coexisted in a fragile balance, their stories intertwining in the endless dance of the storm. Determined to bring peace to the restless spirit, I organized a search for the lost family, combing through the dense forests and treacherous roads that had claimed so many lives. Each step brought me closer to the truth, the memories of that night guiding me like a beacon through the storm's remnants. One evening, as the first light of dawn painted the sky in hues of pink and orange, I stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin nestled between two towering pines. The structure was weathered by time, its windows broken and doors hanging off their hinges. Yet there was a sense of familiarity that drew me inside. The interior was sparse, save for a few remnants of a life long gone, faded photographs, torn pieces of clothing, and the lingering scent of sorrow that permeated the air. As I explored the cabin, I found a worn journal lying on a dusty table, its pages filled with desperate pleas and fragmented memories of a family caught in the storm's wrath. Reading through the journal, I discovered the heart-wrenching story of a family who had been driving home from a holiday gathering when their car had gone off the road, plunging into the ravine amidst the fierce storm. The father had been trying to navigate the treacherous conditions, the mother comforting their two children as fear gripped them all. But the storm had claimed them, leaving behind nothing but shattered memories and the haunting echoes of their final moments. As I closed the journal, a sudden chill swept through the cabin, the temperature dropping further as if the spirits themselves were aware of my presence. The room seemed to come alive with whispers and soft sobs, the voices of the lost family seeking closure, their grief intertwined with the relentless storm that had taken them away. I knew then that I had to do more than just uncover the truth. I had to honor their memory, to ensure that their souls found the peace they so desperately sought. I organized a memorial service at Highway 491, gathering the community to remember the lives lost to the storm, to acknowledge the pain and sorrow that lingered like the storm's aftereffects. The night of the memorial, the storm had abated, leaving behind a clear, star-studded sky that seemed to offer a sense of calm and closure. We lit candles along the highway, each flickering flame a beacon of hope and remembrance for the lost souls who had been taken by the unforgiving winter night. As I stood there, surrounded by the comforting presence of family and friends, I felt a gentle breeze brush against my face, the air filled with a sense of peace and gratitude. The spirit of the father, the mother, and their children seemed to linger for a moment, their silent thanks echoing through the night before fading into the gentle whispers of the wind. The haunting presence on Highway 491 had finally found peace. The restless spirits laid to rest by the collective effort of a community united by sorrow and hope. The thin veil between the living and the dead had been lifted, allowing the lost souls to move on from the eternal storm that had once bound them. Years have passed since that transformative night, but the lessons remain etched in my heart. I continue to patrol the highways, a vigilant protector of the roads and a believer in the unseen forces that shape our lives. The memory of the shadow behind the mirror serves as a reminder that some roads lead not just to destinations, but to the very heart of our deepest fears and the mysteries that lie just beyond the veil of the known. And so, I warn others, respect the roads you travel, honor the memories of those who have lost their way, and understand that some places hold secrets too profound to uncover. For in the heart of the winter storm, amidst the silent snow and the lingering shadows, lies a darkness that can consume even the strongest of spirits, but also a light that can guide us towards redemption and peace. Story number 2. The Phantom Drive, USA. 1985. I still wake up in the dead of night. The memory of that frigid December evening in 1985 clawing at my consciousness like the relentless winds that swept through the quiet suburbs of Pennsylvania. My name is Officer David Mitchell, and the haunting events that unfolded on that old country road have left an indelible mark on my soul. A constant reminder of the thin line between reality and the supernatural. It was a bitterly cold night, the kind where the air bites through your uniform and the snow blankets everything in a suffocating silence. I had been on duty for over 12 hours, patrolling the deserted stretches of Route 66 that snaked through our small town. The roads were slick with freshly fallen snow, making every turn a cautious endeavor. My patrol car's heater struggled against the winter chill, and the dim glow of the dashboard lights cast long shadows on the windshield, creating an eerie atmosphere that matched the stillness outside. As I cruised along the winding highway, my thoughts drifted to the monotonous routine of police work, the occasional traffic stop, the occasional call about a lost pet or a stranded motorist. It was supposed to be a quiet night, but something about the stormy weather kept me on high alert. The radio crackled intermittently, snippets of dispatcher chatter barely penetrating the heavy snowfall that obscured the world beyond my windshield. Around midnight, my headlights caught a glimpse of something unusual. A solitary car abandoned in the middle of the road. It was an old sedan, its paint faded and windows frosted over, parked haphazardly as if the driver had fled in haste. The vehicle stood out starkly against the pristine white landscape, a lone sentinel amidst the swirling snow. Curiosity piqued. I decided to investigate. I slowed the bus to a stop just inches from the abandoned car, my heart pounding with a mix of concern and unease. The engine idled softly, the only sound breaking the oppressive silence of the storm. I reached for my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness as I approached the sedan cautiously. The driver's side door was slightly ajar, the hinges creaking softly with each gust of wind. I knocked on the window, calling out, "Hello? Is anyone in there?" My voice echoed eerily in the stillness, but there was no response, only the relentless howl of the storm outside. I hesitated for a moment, contemplating whether to enter the vehicle or continue on my patrol, but something deep within me urged me to help. to ensure that no one was in distress. I reached out and slowly pushed the door open, the cold air rushing in to greet me like an icy embrace. Inside the car, I found nothing but a pile of old, torn family photographs scattered across the passenger seat. The images were faded and worn, depicting smiling faces frozen in time, a family of 4 posing beside their vintage car, a young couple laughing under a blooming cherry tree, children playing in the snow. Each photo seemed to hold a story, a fragment of a life that had long since faded into obscurity. As I sifted through the photos, a chill ran down my spine. There was something unsettling about the display of memories left behind, a sense of loss and abandonment that hung heavy in the air. I glanced around the car, searching for any signs of the occupants, but the interior was as empty as it had appeared from the outside. Just as I was about to leave, my attention was drawn to the back seat. There, nestled among the remnants of a long-forgotten family, was a single photograph that stood out from the rest. It was a picture of a woman in a vibrant red kimono, her eyes hollow and devoid of life, staring directly at the camera with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. Her presence seemed almost otherworldly, a ghostly figure frozen in time. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the car, startling me and causing my flashlight to flicker. I spun around, my heart racing, to see the sedan begin to move, gliding slowly down the road as if propelled by an invisible force. My breath caught in my throat as I realized the impossible. The car was moving on its own, sliding toward me without any visible driver. Instinctively, I reached for my service pistol, the cold metal a reassuring weight in my hand. "Stop!" I commanded, my voice steady despite the fear gripping me. The car came to an abrupt halt just a few feet away, the engine still running without a driver. I took a cautious step forward, my eyes locked on the phantom vehicle. But before I could take another step, the car vanished, disappearing into the swirling snow as if it had never existed. I stood there, frozen in place, my mind racing to comprehend what I had just witnessed. The storm raged on around me, the snowflakes dancing like spectral apparitions in the night air. Panic surged through me as I realized the gravity of the situation. I was alone on a deserted road, confronted by an inexplicable supernatural phenomenon. The haunting image of the woman in the red kimono burned itself into my memory, her empty eyes staring into my very soul. I hurried back to my patrol car, the oppressive silence of the night weighing heavily on my shoulders. The encounter left me shaken, my mind grappling with questions that defied logical explanation. Was it a ghost? A residual energy from a tragic event long past? The photograph and the moving sedan hinted at a story that had been lost to time, a family forever frozen in the midst of their final moments. The next day, I delved into the records, searching for any information about the abandoned sedan or the mysterious woman in the photos. Hours turned into days as I scoured old archives and interviewed longtime residents, piecing together fragments of a story that seemed to blur the lines between reality and the supernatural. I discovered that Highway 77 had been the site of a devastating car accident nearly 2 decades earlier. A family of 4 had been driving home from a holiday gathering when their vehicle had gone off the road, plunging into a ravine during a fierce snowstorm. Despite the efforts of rescue teams, the entire family had perished, their car abandoned on the very stretch of road I had patrolled. The photos I had found were traced back to the family. They were memories of happier times, moments captured before the tragedy that had claimed their lives. The woman in the red kimono was the mother, her vibrant attire a stark contrast to the grim reality of the accident. It seemed that the spirits of the lost family were forever bound to the highway, their restless souls unable to find peace. As I reflected on the case, a sense of duty settled over me. I couldn't let their story fade into obscurity, forgotten by time and dismissed as mere ghost stories. Determined to bring closure to their restless spirits, I began organizing memorials and collaborating with paranormal investigators to better understand the phenomena plaguing Highway 77. Months passed, and the sightings of the moving sedan and the apparition of the woman in red became less frequent. Though not entirely absent, the memorials provided solace to the family and the community, a way to honor their memory and acknowledge the tragedy that had forever altered our town. Yet, despite the efforts to lay the spirits to rest, the haunting never fully dissipated. On certain nights, when the snowstorm was at its peak, I would catch fleeting glimpses of the phantom sedan or hear the distant sound of a car horn echoing through the darkness. The image of the woman in the red kimono remained a haunting presence, a symbol of the eternal struggle between life and death, and the lingering echoes of past tragedies. The case of the abandoned sedan on Highway 77 taught me more than I could have ever imagined about the unseen forces that dwell within our world. It was a stark reminder that some stories are too profound to be forgotten, their lessons etched into the fabric of time and memory. The haunting legacy of that cold winter night continues to influence my perspective, shaping my understanding of the delicate balance between the living and the dead. Years have passed since that fateful night, but the memory of the phantom sedan and the ghostly woman remains vivid, a spectral reminder that some roads lead not just to destinations, but to the very heart of our deepest fears and the mysteries that lie just beyond the veil of the known. And so, I warn others, respect the roads you travel, honor the memories of those who have lost their way, and understand that some places hold secrets too profound to uncover. For in the heart of the winter storm, amidst the silent snow and the lingering shadows, lies a darkness that can consume even the strongest of spirits, leaving behind only echoes of fear and the eternal struggle for peace. Story number 3. Midnight Drive on Yami Road, Japan, 2002. I still wake up in the dead of night, the memory of that winter drive in 2002 lingering in my mind like a stubborn shadow. My name is Hiroshi Tanaka, and the events that unfolded on Yami Road have haunted me ever since, a constant reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. It was a bitterly cold December evening, the kind where the air bites through your jacket and the snow blankets everything in a suffocating silence. I was driving home from a late shift at the office, the streets of Tokyo already quiet as the city settled into its winter slumber. Yami Road, a deserted stretch of highway that cut through the outskirts of the city, was a shortcut I often took to avoid the congested city center. It was infamous among locals for its eerie reputation, whispers of restless spirits and unexplained phenomena that supposedly plagued the desolate highway. That night, the weather had taken a turn for the worse. A heavy snowfall had started hours earlier, turning the world outside my windshield into a swirling maelstrom of white. Visibility was minimal, the road barely visible through the thick curtain of snow. My headlights pierced the darkness, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to dance with every gust of wind. The radio played softly in the background, a classic Enka song that somehow felt out of place in the midst of the storm's fury. As I navigated the treacherous road, my mind wandered to the stories I'd heard growing up, tales of drivers encountering ghostly apparitions, of phantom figures standing in the middle of the road, only to vanish when approached. I had always dismissed them as urban legends, products of overactive imaginations fueled by the isolation of Yami Road. But that night, something felt different, an unsettling tension that gripped me as I continued my drive. Around midnight, with the storm showing no signs of relenting, I saw her, a solitary figure standing in the middle of Yami Road, clad in a flowing red kimono that stood out starkly against the endless white expanse. My heart skipped a beat as I slammed on the brakes, the bus skidding to a halt just inches from her. The woman stood motionless, her back straight, her gaze fixed on me with eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 unspoken sorrows. "Are you okay?" I called out, my voice wavering despite my attempt to sound steady. She didn't respond, her expression unreadable as she continued to stare at me in silence. I hesitated for a moment, debating whether to offer assistance or simply drive around her. But something compelled me to help, a deep-seated urge that I couldn't ignore. I reached for the door handle, the cold metal biting into my palm as I swung the door open. The biting wind rushed in, chilling me to the core. As I stepped out into the storm, I approached her cautiously, my footsteps crunching on the fresh snow. "Can I help you?" I asked again, taking a step closer. She remained silent, her eyes never leaving mine. The intensity of her gaze felt almost supernatural, a lifeless void that sent shivers down my spine. I reached out to offer my hand, but before my fingers could make contact, she vanished into thin air, as if swallowed by the very snowstorm that had brought her into my path. Panic surged through me as I stared into the empty space where she had stood moments before. My mind raced, trying to rationalize what I had just witnessed. It had to be a trick of the light, or perhaps a hallucination brought on by the relentless cold and isolation. I closed the door and hurried back into the bus, the warmth inside a stark contrast to the freezing storm outside. As I resumed my drive, the feeling of being watched lingered like a shadow, every flicker of movement outside my windshield heightening my unease. The storm continued to rage, the wind howling louder, as if echoing the whispers of the past. I tried to shake off the encounter, convincing myself it was nothing more than a figment of my imagination. But deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. Hours passed in a blur of white and darkness, the storm showing no signs of letting up. My exhaustion grew, each mile further away from civilization amplifying the isolation that already weighed heavily on me. It was then that my phone rang, the shrill sound cutting through the silence like a knife. I glanced at the screen, an unknown number. Hesitant, I answered. "Hello," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Detective Tanaka?" A trembling voice replied. "This is Officer Sato from the local precinct. We need to talk about an incident on Yami Road." My heart raced as I listened to Officer Sato explain that earlier that evening, a woman in a red kimono had been found lifeless in the middle of the road, her body unnaturally still, eyes wide open in silent terror. No visible wounds, no signs of struggle, just a ghostly apparition left behind by the storm. I felt a chill run down my spine, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. The woman I had encountered was no hallucination. She was a restless spirit, trapped in a loop of her final, tragic moments. The realization hit me hard, the weight of the encounter pressing down on me with an almost physical force. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to visit the scene of the incident. Armed with my notepad and a flashlight, I drove back to Yami Road, the memories of that night fueling my resolve. The road was empty, the aftermath of the storm evident in the thick layers of snow that had settled over everything. The spot where the woman had stood was marked by the remnants of a once lively bus, now frozen in time by the relentless winter. I approached the area cautiously, the air thick with an eerie stillness. The snow-covered landscape seemed to hold its breath, the only sound the distant whisper of the wind through the trees. As I surveyed the scene, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A series of footprints leading away from the bus, gradually fading into the dense forest that bordered the highway. The footprints were small and delicate. Unlike any human tracks I had ever seen, they seemed to dissolve into the snow, disappearing without a trace as they ventured deeper into the woods. A sense of dread settled over me as I realized that the spirit was still searching, its presence lingering like a haunting melody that refused to fade away. I followed the footprints, my flashlight cutting through the darkness as I ventured into the forest. The trees loomed overhead, their branches heavy with snow, creating a tunnel of shadows that seemed to press in on me from all sides. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the crunch of snow beneath my boots and the distant howl of the wind. As I walked deeper into the woods, the temperature seemed to drop further, the cold seeping into my bones and numbing my senses. The footprints led me to a small clearing, where an old, abandoned shrine stood, its wooden structure weathered and worn by time. The shrine was adorned with offerings of rice cakes and sake bottles, remnants of past prayers and hopes. I approached the shrine cautiously, the air around me thick with a palpable energy. The footprints ended here, their final step pointing directly at the shrine's entrance. A chill ran down my spine as I pushed open the wooden doors, the hinges creaking ominously as I stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit by the faint glow of paper lanterns, their light casting long, wavering shadows on the walls. At the center of the shrine stood a stone statue of a woman, her features delicate and serene, her eyes closed in eternal repose. The air was heavy with the scent of incense, the lingering presence of prayers long forgotten. As I stood there, a sudden gust of wind blew through the shrine, extinguishing the lanterns and plunging me into darkness. My heart raced as I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness to reveal the statue now standing before me. But something was different. Her eyes were open, staring directly into mine with a hollow, lifeless gaze that sent shivers down my spine. "Help me," I whispered, my voice trembling with fear and desperation. The atmosphere grew thick with an unseen presence, the air heavy with sorrow and longing. I felt a presence behind me, the oppressive weight of a spirit yearning for release pressing down on me from all sides. The temperature plummeted further, my breath visible in the frigid air as I realized the true nature of the shrine, a place where restless spirits lingered, their souls trapped by unresolved tragedies. I knew what I had to do. Gathering my courage, I began to chant a prayer, drawing from the teachings of my upbringing and the stories passed down through generations. The words flowed from my lips, a plea for peace and understanding, a desperate attempt to free the spirit from her eternal torment. As I chanted, the air around me began to shimmer with an ethereal light, the presence of the spirit becoming more defined as the power of the prayer took hold. The statue's eyes softened, a sense of peace replacing the hollow gaze that had haunted me moments before. The oppressive energy lifted, the air now filled with a gentle warmth that contrasted sharply with the freezing cold. "Thank you," a whisper echoed through the shrine, the voice filled with gratitude and relief. The spirit of the woman in red kimono had found peace, her restless soul finally freed from the confines of Yami Road. Exhausted but triumphant, I left the shrine, the snowstorm now a distant memory as dawn broke through the clouds, casting a soft glow over the landscape. The footprints had disappeared, replaced by fresh tracks that led back to the bus, a sign that the spirit had finally moved on. As I drove away from Yami Road, the memory of that night lingered like a haunting melody, a reminder of the thin line. Story number 4. Driving through the Vale, USA. 1995. I still wake up in the dead of night, the memory of that chilling winter drive in 1995 clawing at my consciousness like the icy winds that once swept through the desolate highways of the American West. My name is Jack Reynolds, and the haunting encounter I had on that fateful night remains etched in my soul, a constant reminder of the thin line between reality and the supernatural. It was a bitterly cold December evening when I decided to head home after a long shift at the local diner in a small town nestled in the foothills of the Rockies. The roads were slick with freshly fallen snow, the darkness of night enveloping the landscape in an oppressive blanket. I was driving along Highway 77, a stretch known for its scenic beauty and equally notorious for its eerie legends. Locals whispered tales of spirits wandering the lonely roads, especially during the harsh winter months. But I dismissed them as mere folklore until that night. As I cruised down the winding highway, the rhythmic hum of the engine and the soft glow of the dashboard lights provided a comforting backdrop to my solitary journey. The radio played an old rock ballad, the lyrics barely audible over the sound of the tires crunching on the snow-covered pavement. My mind wandered, contemplating the week's challenges and looking forward to the warmth of home. Around midnight, visibility began to drop as thick snowflakes swirled violently around the windshield. The storm had rolled in faster than expected, transforming the peaceful drive into a battle against the elements. I turned on the headlights, their beams struggling to penetrate the blinding whiteout. The road ahead was barely discernible, the world outside reduced to a monochromatic blur of snow and shadow. That's when I saw her. a solitary figure standing in the middle of the highway, shrouded in a flowing white dress that seemed to glow eerily against the storm's fury. Her presence was both ethereal and unsettling, her silhouette barely visible through the swirling snow. My heart skipped a beat as I slowed the bus to a stop, the engine's roar momentarily silenced by the howling wind. "Are you okay?" I called out, my voice barely audible over the storm's rage. She didn't respond, her gaze fixed on me with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. I felt an inexplicable urge to help, to reach out and offer assistance to the stranded soul. Gathering my courage, I opened the passenger door and stepped out into the biting cold, the snow whipping around me like icy tendrils. As I approached, her form began to shimmer and fade, as if she was made of the very snow that surrounded us. "Do you need help?" I asked again, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and concern. Suddenly, the wind intensified, blowing her back into the storm with a force that felt almost supernatural. I reached out, but her hand passed through mine like smoke, leaving me grasping at nothing. Before I could react, she vanished completely, swallowed by the blinding snowstorm. Panic surged through me as I realized the severity of the situation. The storm had not only trapped me, but had also revealed something beyond my understanding, something that defied the natural laws I had always trusted. I rushed back to the bus, attempting to start the engine, but the cold had seeped into every component, rendering it immobile. The realization hit me hard. I was stranded, miles away from any sign of civilization, with no way to call for help. As the hours dragged on, the storm showed no signs of letting up. I tried to keep warm by staying close to the engine, wrapping myself in blankets, but the biting cold made it nearly impossible to stay comfortable. The isolation weighed heavily on me, the silence of the night amplifying every creak and groan of the bus. Sleep was elusive, my mind racing with thoughts of the mysterious woman and the eerie stillness that surrounded me. Around 3 a.m., a faint tapping sound began to echo through the bus, a rhythmic knocking that seemed to come from the front windshield. My heart pounded as I approached, shining my flashlight onto the glass. But there was nothing there, only the relentless storm outside. The tapping continued, growing louder and more insistent, as if someone was desperately trying to get my attention. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself it was just the wind or maybe a branch scraping against the glass. But deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. The atmosphere inside the bus became thick with tension, the oppressive silence broken only by the sound of the storm's fury outside and the persistent knocking that refused to cease. Suddenly, the temperature inside the bus dropped further, my breath visible in the frigid air. The tapping stopped abruptly, replaced by a cold, eerie silence that pressed in on me from all sides. I felt a presence, a weight in the room that made my skin crawl. The bus seemed to come alive, the walls pulsating with an unseen energy that made it difficult to breathe. In a state of heightened fear, I decided to venture outside, hoping to find a way to restart the engine or at least seek shelter until the storm passed. Wrapping myself tightly in my coat, I opened the passenger door and stepped out into the blinding snow. The world outside was a swirling vortex of white, the wind howling like a chorus of lost souls. As I walked down the snowy sidewalk, the bus's doors remained firmly shut, the interior a stark contrast to the chaos outside. The tapping sounds had ceased, but the sense of being watched lingered, an invisible presence that followed me with every step. I glanced back, half expecting to see the woman in white standing behind me, but there was nothing, only the relentless storm and the endless expanse of snow. Desperation set in as I realized that I was utterly alone, trapped in a nightmarish landscape with no way out. The cold was relentless, numbing my fingers and toes, making each breath a struggle. I stumbled forward, trying to find any sign of life, any indication that I wasn't entirely alone in this frozen hell. Hours passed in a haze of white and darkness, the storm showing no signs of relenting. My body grew numb from the cold, my mind clouded by fear and exhaustion. Just as hope began to fade, I spotted a faint light in the distance, a glimmer of warmth amidst the storm's fury. With renewed determination, I pushed forward, the promise of shelter driving me through the relentless snow. As I approached the light, I realized it was coming from a small, dilapidated cabin nestled between two towering pines. The structure was old, its windows dark and the door hanging off its hinges. But the warm glow emanating from within was a beacon of hope. I hurried towards it, my heart pounding with a mix of relief and apprehension. I knocked on the door, calling out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" My voice trembled with a mix of fear and desperation. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a dimly lit interior that seemed both inviting and foreboding. I stepped inside, the warmth enveloping me like a comforting embrace. The storm's fury now a distant memory outside. Inside, the cabin was sparsely furnished, with a single wooden table and a few chairs scattered about. A fireplace crackled in the corner, casting flickering shadows on the walls. I approached the table, hoping to find someone who could help. But there was no one there, only a solitary photograph lying face down on the surface. I picked up the photo, revealing an image of a family gathered around the table, their smiles warm and genuine. My heart ached at the sight, a stark contrast to the isolation I had felt outside. As I examined the photograph, a sudden chill swept through the room, and the temperature dropped once more, the air thick with an unseen presence. The door slammed shut behind me, and I spun around, my flashlight casting eerie shadows across the room. The photograph on the table began to glow with an ethereal light, the family's eyes seemingly following my every move. I felt a presence behind me, a silent force pressing in on me from all sides, making it difficult to breathe. "Why are you here?" a voice whispered, barely audible over the crackling of the fire. I turned slowly, my heart racing, and saw her, the woman in white, standing at the far end of the cabin, her hollow eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. She took a step forward, her movements graceful yet unnerving, as if she was both there and not there at the same time. I was lost in the storm," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "I saw you on the road, and you asked for help." She didn't respond, her gaze unwavering as she continued to advance, the flickering light casting long, distorted shadows that danced around her like spectral apparitions. The air grew colder, my breath visible in the frigid air as fear tightened its grip on me. "I need to help you," pleaded, taking a step towards her. But as I did, she began to fade, her form becoming translucent, blending seamlessly with the shadows that enveloped the room. Before I could react, a powerful gust of wind blew through the cabin, slamming the door shut once more and trapping me inside. The photograph on the table began to emit a blinding light, and the room seemed to pulse with an unseen energy that threatened to overwhelm me. I felt a presence pressing in on me, the air thick with sorrow and despair. Desperate to escape, I turned to run, but the door wouldn't budge, the hinges groaning under an invisible force. The fireplace flared to life, casting an intense heat that contrasted sharply with the freezing cold. Making my head spin, the woman in white reappeared, her eyes filled with a sorrowful rage that defied understanding. "You can't leave," she whispered, her voice echoing through the cabin like a mournful song. "You're trapped here with us." Panic surged through me as I realized the truth. Highway 491 was not just a road, but a conduit between the living and the dead, a place where restless spirits lingered, forever trapped by their own tragic stories. The woman in white was one such spirit, bound to the highway by the very forces that had claimed her life years ago. Summoning every ounce of courage, I reached out to her, determined to break the cycle of despair that held her captive. "Let me help you," pleaded, my voice steady despite the fear that gripped me. "I want to set you free." She hesitated, her form wavering between presence and absence, her eyes searching mine for a glimmer of hope. Slowly, she extended her hand, the air around her shimmering with an ethereal light. I took her hand, feeling a surge of energy pass through me, a warmth that contrasted with the surrounding cold. In that moment, the cabin began to change, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as the spirits of the lost began to find peace. The photograph on the table faded, the family's smiles now radiating a serene tranquility. The woman in white smiled softly, her eyes no longer hollow but filled with gratitude and relief. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice now gentle and full of hope. "You've set us free." With those final words, she vanished, the cabin returning to its peaceful state. The door swung open, allowing me to step back into the storm, now a distant memory as the first light of dawn broke through the clouds. The road ahead was clear, the snow now a pristine blanket covering the highway. Free from the chaos of the night, I drove home with a sense of fulfillment and peace, the haunting memories of that night finally beginning to fade. The legend of Highway 491 lived on, but now it was a story of redemption and the enduring power of compassion to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. Years have passed since that transformative night, but the lessons remain with me. I continue to patrol the highways, a vigilant protector of the roads and a believer in the unseen forces that shape our lives. The memory of the woman in white serves as a reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of bravery come from a place of empathy and a willingness to help those who cannot help themselves. And so, I warn others, heed the warnings of the past, respect the boundaries set by the spirits that linger, and understand that some roads hold secrets too profound to uncover. For in the heart of the wilderness, amidst the silent snow and the lingering shadows, lies a darkness that can consume even the strongest of spirits, but also a light that can guide us towards redemption and peace. Story number 5. The Shadow That Never Leaves, USA, 2010. I still wake up in the dead of night, the memory of that frigid December evening in 2010 clawing at my consciousness like the relentless winds that swept through the empty highways of California. My name is Detective Michael Lawson, and the haunting encounter I had on Highway 491, once infamously known as Highway 666, has left an indelible mark on my soul, a constant reminder of the thin line between reality and the supernatural. It was a bitterly cold night, the kind where the air feels like shards of ice slicing through your skin. I was driving home after a long shift at the precinct, the streets slick with fresh snowfall that had blanketed the city overnight. The highway was deserted, the usual hustle and bustle silenced by the heavy snowstorm that had rolled in without warning. Visibility was minimal, the windshield wipers struggling to keep up with the relentless barrage of snowflakes. As I navigated the winding roads of Highway 491, my thoughts drifted to the case I'd been working on, an unsolved string of accidents that had plagued the stretch of road for years. There were whispers of something sinister at play, tales of drivers vanishing without a trace, leaving behind only questions and a trail of unexplained mysteries. But tonight, my focus was solely on getting home, away from the haunting shadows of my profession. About an hour into my drive, the storm seemed to intensify, the snow piling higher and the wind howling like a chorus of lost souls. The road ahead was a blur of white, the headlights barely cutting through the tempest. That's when I saw him, a solitary figure standing in the middle of the highway, swaying gently against the wind. He was dressed in a long, flowing black coat that billowed dramatically in the storm, his presence almost ethereal against the backdrop of swirling snow. My heart skipped a beat. Drivers are trained to remain vigilant, especially in these treacherous conditions. I eased the bus to a stop, the engine grumbling softly as I brought it to a halt beside the stranded figure. The man looked up at me, his face obscured by the shadow of his coat. But his eyes, oh, those eyes were unmistakably hollow, staring directly into mine with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. "Do you need help?" I called out, my voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. He remained silent, his gaze unwavering. I felt an inexplicable urge to assist, to reach out and offer whatever aid I could. I unlocked the passenger door and stepped out into the biting cold. the wind whipping around me like a vengeful spirit. The man stood motionless, his posture rigid as if frozen in time. Yet there was a palpable sense of desperation emanating from him. I approached cautiously, every step crunching through the deep snow. "Are you okay? Do you need a ride somewhere?" I asked again, my voice tinged with concern. He didn't respond. Instead, he took a step forward, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of emotion in his eyes, a fleeting glimpse of fear or perhaps sadness. But then, as quickly as he had appeared, he began to fade, his form becoming translucent, merging with the swirling snowflakes around him. Before I could react, a powerful gust of wind swept through the highway, slamming the door shut behind me and pushing me back into the bus. I stumbled, regaining my balance as the man vanished entirely, swallowed by the storm as if he had never been there at all. My heart pounded in my chest, the encounter leaving me shaken and unnerved. I sat back in the driver's seat, trying to steady my breathing, the weight of the man's hollow eyes lingering in my mind. I glanced at the passenger door, half expecting to see him reappear. But there was nothing, only the swirling snow and the oppressive silence of the storm. Shaking off the unease, I started the engine and resumed my drive home, the memory of the mysterious man etched into my thoughts. But as the hours passed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, an invisible presence that seemed to follow me through the desolate highway. Every shadow cast by my headlights felt like it was teeming with unseen eyes, and every gust of wind seemed to carry whispers of the past. The next morning, the storm had finally subsided, leaving behind a serene blanket of snow that covered the once treacherous roads. I pulled into my driveway, the chill of the night still lingering in the air. As I stepped out of the bus, I couldn't help but glance back towards Highway 491, half expecting to see the man in black standing there once more. But the road was empty, the only trace of the night's chaos the lingering snowflakes dancing in the morning breeze. Weeks passed, but the memory of that night haunted me. I delved deeper into the history of Highway 491, uncovering stories of the past that spoke of tragedies and unexplained disappearances. One incident, in particular, stood out, a collision that had occurred on this very stretch of road nearly 2 decades earlier. The driver had vanished without a trace, his vehicle left abandoned amidst the snowstorm. Much like the man I had encountered, the local legends grew, tales of a winter ghost that roamed the highway during the fiercest of storms, a restless spirit seeking help that was never granted. Some believed it was the soul of the man who had vanished, forever trapped in a loop of his final, desperate moments. Others thought it was a manifestation of the collective fears and tragedies that had plagued the road over the years. My skepticism began to wane as I continued to experience the lingering effects of that night. Odd noises echoed through the quiet streets, faint whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The feeling of being watched persisted, a shadowy presence that clung to me like a second skin. I started noticing strange occurrences, items misplaced in my home, eerie reflections in mirrors, and dreams filled with fragmented memories of the man in black and the stormy highway. One evening, driven by a mix of curiosity and a need for closure, I decided to return to Highway 491. Armed with my flashlight and a recording device, I ventured out into the night, determined to uncover the truth behind the haunting. The highway was quiet, the snow-covered road stretching out into the darkness like a path to another realm. The memory of that night was vivid in my mind, each step bringing me closer to the source of my unease. As I drove along the familiar route, the wind picked up, whipping through the trees and sending snowflakes swirling in a frenzied dance. My headlights caught a glimpse of movement in the distance, a solitary figure standing by the side of the road, just as I had seen before. My heart raced as I approached, the figure becoming clearer as I drew near. It was the man in black, his eyes hollow and empty, standing motionless in the middle of the highway. "Do you need help?" I called out, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. He didn't respond, his gaze fixed on mine. I stepped out of the bus once more, the cold biting into my skin as I approached him. But as I reached out to offer assistance, the man began to fade, his form dissolving into the snowstorm with a final, anguished scream that echoed through the night. Before I could react, the bus was thrust forward by an invisible force, sliding several yards down the slick road despite my attempts to control it. I regained control just in time to see the man vanish completely, leaving behind only the lingering sense of dread and the relentless howl of the wind. I sat back in the driver's seat, the reality of the encounter sinking in. The man in black was more than just a ghost story. It was a manifestation of the unresolved tragedies that had haunted this highway for years. His presence was a reminder of the fragility of life and the lingering shadows of the past that refused to fade away. Determined to put an end to the haunting, I continued my research, uncovering records of accidents and disappearances that had taken place on Highway 491. Each story was a thread in a tangled web of sorrow and loss, weaving together the tapestry of the highway's dark legacy. I reached out to families of the missing, listening to their tales of loved ones lost to the unforgiving winter and the malevolent spirits that seemed to linger in the aftermath. One night, as I sat in my study surrounded by notes and photographs, I heard a familiar knocking sound. My heart raced as I glanced out the window, the cold wind howling outside. The sound echoed through my home, a relentless reminder of the man I couldn't forget. I approached the door cautiously, but there was no one there, only the swirling snow and the oppressive silence. As I turned away, the lights flickered, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The memory of the man in black resurfaced, his hollow eyes staring into the depths of my mind. I realized then that some ghosts are not meant to be laid to rest, their presence a perpetual reminder of the tragedies that bind them to the earthly realm. The haunting of Highway 491 never truly left me. It became a part of who I am, a constant companion in the shadows of my thoughts and dreams. I continue to patrol the highways, my mind always alert for the signs of the supernatural, the echoes of the past whispering through the cold winter nights. The legend of the winter ghost lives on, a testament to the enduring power of fear and the mysteries that lie just beyond the reach of our understanding. Highway 491 remains a place of sorrow and tragedy, a road where the living and the dead coexist in a fragile balance, their stories intertwining in the endless dance of the night. And so, I warn others, respect the roads you travel. Heed the warnings of those who have experienced the unexplainable, and understand that some places hold secrets too dark to uncover. For in the heart of the winter storm, amidst the silent snow and the lingering shadows, lies a darkness that can consume even the strongest of spirits, leaving behind only echoes of fear and the eternal struggle for redemption. Story number 6. The driver returns from the cemetery, UK. 1979. I still wake up in the dead of night. The memory of that frigid winter evening in 1979 clawing at my consciousness like the icy winds that swept through the quiet suburbs of London. My name is James Mitchell, and the haunting events that transpired on that deserted road have left an indelible mark on my soul, a constant reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. It was a bitterly cold December night when I found myself driving back from the St. Mary's Cemetery, the final resting place of my late grandmother. The sky was a blanket of overcast gray, the streetlights casting long, eerie shadows on the snow-covered pavement. The night was silent, save for the occasional rustle of the wind through the bare trees lining the narrow streets. I had finished paying my respects earlier, the solemn ceremony now etched in my memory as I navigated the familiar route home. The busier roads were deserted, the city's hustle and bustle momentarily silenced by the winter chill. My mind was preoccupied with thoughts of family and the passing of time, the weight of loss pressing heavily upon me. As I approached the outskirts of the city, the road grew narrower, flanked by dense clusters of trees that seemed to close in around me. The headlights pierced through the darkness, illuminating patches of snow that glistened like scattered diamonds. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. Midnight was just a few minutes away. Suddenly, My headlights caught something, or someone, standing in the middle of the road. A lone figure, cloaked in a long, flowing black coat, stood motionless, staring directly at me with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through the very fabric of my being. My heart skipped a beat as I slowed the bus, the engine humming softly as I prepared to offer assistance. "Are you okay?" I called out, my voice barely audible over the gentle hum of the engine. The figure remained silent, its expression unreadable beneath the shadows of the hood. I hesitated, uncertainty gnawing at me, but something compelled me to approach. I stepped out of the bus, the biting cold seeping into my bones as I drew closer to the mysterious stranger. "Do you need help?" I asked again, my voice steadier this time, as I reached out to touch the man's shoulder. A cold gust of wind whipped around us, sending snowflakes swirling into a frenzied dance. My hand met only air, the figure disappearing as suddenly as it had appeared, swallowed by the storm that had erupted out of nowhere. Confused and unnerved, I looked back at the road, but there was no trace of him, no footprints, no disturbed snow, nothing to indicate his presence. My mind raced, trying to rationalize the encounter. Perhaps it was a trick of the light, or maybe someone had briefly wandered onto the road before disappearing into the darkness. Shaking off the unease, I climbed back into the bus, the doors sliding shut with a soft click. As I resumed driving, the storm intensified, the snowflakes now pounding against the windshield in a relentless barrage. Visibility was nearly zero, the world outside reduced to a swirling whiteout that made navigation a challenge. I pressed the accelerator, determined to reach home despite the worsening conditions. The roads were treacherous, each turn a gamble against the biting cold and the overwhelming snowfall. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up, their rhythmic swish barely making a dent in the onslaught of snow. Minutes felt like hours as I battled through the storm, my mind haunted by the image of the mysterious figure and the hollow gaze that had followed me into the night. The feeling of being watched persisted, an invisible presence that clung to me like the freezing wind. Just as I began to lose hope, a faint outline emerged through the blinding snow, a familiar street sign pointing towards my neighborhood. Relief washed over me as I recognized the road, the lights of my house twinkling like a beacon in the distance. I breathed a sigh of relief, easing the bus onto the driveway. As I parked, the storm began to subside, the relentless winds dying down to a gentle whisper. The streets were quiet, the snow now a soft, undisturbed blanket covering everything in sight. I stepped out of the bus, the cold still biting at my skin as I made my way to the front door. The house stood silent and still, a warm light emanating from the windows, a stark contrast to the darkness of the night. But as I approached, a chill ran down my spine, an inexplicable sense of dread settling over me. The front door was ajar, the faint sound of muffled cries echoing from within. My heart pounded as I pushed the door open, the interior illuminated by the soft glow of a single lamp. Inside, the house was as I had left it, cozy, warm, untouched by the storm, but the air was thick with an eerie stillness, the silence pressing in on me from all sides. I wandered through the rooms, calling out for my family, but there was no response, only the unsettling feeling that something was terribly wrong. It was then that I noticed it, the empty chair at the dining table, a single photograph lying face down on the surface. My hands trembled as I picked it up, revealing an image of my family together, smiling and happy. But the sense of unease only deepened as I realized something was missing. One person's absence glaringly obvious. A cold wind swept through the room, the door slamming shut with a force that sent me stumbling back. The lamp flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the walls like spectral figures. The temperature dropped abruptly, my breath visible in the frigid air as a voice whispered my name from the darkness. "James!" I spun around, the voice sending shivers down my spine. The silhouette of the man in black reappeared, his hollow eyes staring directly into mine, a silent plea etched into his ghostly visage. Before I could react, He began to dissolve into the shadows, his form becoming translucent as he reached out towards me. Terror seized me as I realized he was more than just a ghostly apparition. Something malevolent and ancient was at play, his presence suffocating and overpowering. I tried to run, but my legs felt heavy, the room closing in around me as the spirit advanced, his empty eyes reflecting a sorrowful rage that defied understanding. Desperate, I reached out, my hand meeting nothing but cold air as the figure dissipated into the darkness. The house seemed to come alive with whispers and moans, the spirits of the lost converging upon me, their ethereal forms swirling like mist in the night. I stumbled back, my heart racing, as the realization dawned on me: Highway 666 was not just a road, but a gateway between the living and the dead, a place where restless souls lingered, forever trapped by the tragedies of the past. The spirit that had haunted me was one of countless others, each with their own story of loss and despair, bound to the highway by the very forces that had claimed them. The storm outside was now a distant memory, the morning sun breaking through the clouds to reveal a world seemingly untouched by the night's horrors. I stood alone in the silent house, the echoes of the past lingering in the air, a stark reminder of the thin line between reality and the supernatural. I never spoke of that night again, the memories too painful and the fear too real. But the legend of the winter ghost of Highway 666 lived on, a cautionary tale for those who dared to traverse its lonely stretches. Some say the spirits still roam the highway, their hollow eyes watching and waiting for the next soul to cross their path, forever trapped in the eternal winter of their own making. Years later, I still find myself avoiding that stretch of road, the shadows of the past a constant reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected places. The haunting legacy of Highway 666 serves as a testament to the enduring power of fear and the mysteries that lie just beyond the reach of our understanding. And so, I warn others. Heed the warnings of those who have encountered the supernatural. Respect the boundaries set by the past, and understand that some roads hold secrets too dark to uncover. For in the heart of the wilderness, amidst the silent snow and the lingering shadows, lies a darkness that can consume even the strongest of spirits, leaving behind only echoes of fear and the eternal struggle between the living and the dead. Story number 7. The Haunting on Highway 666, USA, 2003. I still wake up in the dead of night, the memory of that chilling winter drive on Highway 666 clawing at my consciousness like the icy winds that swept through New Mexico's desolate landscape. My name is Mark Thompson, and the events of December 2003 have left an indelible mark on my soul, a haunting reminder of the thin veil between the ordinary and the supernatural. It was a bitterly cold December evening when I decided to take the long drive home after a late shift at the local diner. Highway 666, now officially renamed Highway 491, was infamous for its eerie tales and unexplained phenomena. But like most skeptics, I dismissed them as mere folklore. The road stretched out before me, a lonely ribbon cutting through the vast, snow-covered expanse of New Mexico. The sky was a blanket of deep indigo, stars obscured by the heavy clouds that threatened an impending storm. As I drove through the winding bends of the highway, the only sounds were the steady hum of the engine and the crunch of snow beneath my tires. The scenery was a stark beauty, endless fields of white, towering pines dusted with frost, and the distant silhouette of mountains piercing the horizon. It was supposed to be a peaceful journey, a chance to clear my mind after a long day. Around midnight, with the temperature dropping sharply, the storm finally made its presence known. Snowflakes began to fall in earnest, swirling violently around my windshield, reducing visibility to a mere few feet. I turned on my headlights, the beam cutting through the swirling white like a knife. The road ahead became a blur of white and shadow, the once familiar route now a treacherous path obscured by the relentless blizzard. It was then that I saw her, a solitary figure standing in the middle of the road, shrouded in a flowing white cloak that billowed in the howling wind. Her presence was both ethereal and unsettling, her eyes seemingly piercing through the darkness as they locked onto mine. My heart pounded in my chest as I slowed the bus, the tires skidding slightly on the slick surface. "Are you okay?" I called out, my voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. For a moment, there was no response. The figure remained motionless, her gaze unwavering. Then, without warning, she vanished into thin air, as if swallowed by the storm itself. I blinked, trying to convince myself it was a trick of the light or a figment of my exhausted imagination. But the reality was undeniable. She had been there, standing in the middle of the highway, only to disappear in an instant. Shaken, I reached for the gear shift, but before I could shift into drive, a powerful gust of wind hit the side of the bus, pushing it off course. I fought to regain control, but the vehicle lurched forward, sliding several yards down the slick road despite my efforts to steer. The wheels spun helplessly, gripping nothing but snow and ice, while the engine struggled against the relentless force of the storm. Panic surged through me as I realized the severity of the situation. The bus was stranded in the middle of Highway 666, miles away from the nearest town, engulfed by the unforgiving blizzard. I tried to call for help, but the storm's fury had knocked out the cell phone signal, leaving me isolated and vulnerable. As the hours dragged on, the storm showed no signs of abating. The howling winds seemed to carry whispers of lost souls, their voices echoing through the darkness, heightening my sense of dread. I huddled in the back of the bus, wrapped in blankets, trying to conserve what little warmth I had left. The temperature inside the vehicle plummeted, each breath a visible puff in the frigid air. Around 3 a.m., the eerie sounds intensified. I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching through the snow outside, rhythmic and deliberate, as if someone or something was pacing around the bus. My heart raced as I strained to listen, the fear of the unknown gripping me tightly. Then, the knocking began, soft at first, then growing louder and more insistent, as if someone was trying to force their way into the bus. I approached the window cautiously, peering out into the storm, but saw nothing beyond the swirling snow and the shifting shadows. The figure in white had long since vanished, but the presence lingered, an invisible force pressing down on me. Suddenly, the temperature inside the bus dropped further, the cold seeping into my bones, making it difficult to move. Desperate to find answers, I decided to inspect the exterior of the bus, hoping to spot any signs of the mysterious figure. With trembling hands, I opened the door, the howling wind buffeting me as I stepped out into the blizzard. The snow was thick and deep, making each step a struggle against the fierce elements. As I moved around the bus, the footprints began to emerge, small, delicate impressions in the snow that seemed to lead towards the dense forest bordering the highway. The footprints were unlike any I had seen before, too symmetrical, too precise to belong to a human or any known animal in the region. They wound their way through the trees, disappearing into the darkness beyond. A sense of foreboding settled over me as I followed them, the storm's fury intensifying around me, as if the very mountains were conspiring against me. Hours passed as I trekked through the snow, my legs numb and my vision blurry from exhaustion and cold. The footprints led me deeper into the forest, where the trees stood tall and silent, their branches heavy with snow. The wind seemed to carry a faint, sorrowful melody, a haunting tune that resonated in the depths of my mind, urging me to turn back. But curiosity and fear pushed me forward, each step taking me closer to the unknown. Just as dawn began to break, the storm finally began to subside, leaving behind a serene, snow-covered landscape bathed in the soft light of morning. I found myself at the edge of a small clearing, where the footprints abruptly stopped. In the center stood an old, abandoned cabin, its windows shattered and doors hanging off their hinges. The building was surrounded by an aura of desolation, the remnants of a forgotten past. Compelled by an inexplicable urge, I approached the cabin, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. As I stepped inside, the door creaked ominously, the interior cloaked in darkness. The air was thick with the scent of decay and something else, something metallic and unsettling. My flashlight flickered as I navigated through the dilapidated rooms, the shadows dancing on the walls like specters of the past. In the main living area, I found remnants of a hurried departure, empty plates on the table, a flickering candle still burning, and a photograph of a family that stared back at me with hollow eyes. The eerie silence was broken only by the distant sound of water dripping from a leaky roof, echoing through the empty halls. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind swept through the cabin, extinguishing the candle and plunging me into darkness. The temperature dropped further, my breath visible in the frigid air as the feeling of being watched intensified. I felt a presence behind me, a silent, oppressive force that pressed down on me from all sides. "Leave, leave now," a voice whispered, barely audible over the stillness. I spun around, but there was no one there, only the shadows and the lingering sense of dread. Panic surged through me as I realized I was not alone in the cabin, trapped with the spirits of those who had vanished before me. Desperate to escape, I fled the cabin, the whispers growing louder and more insistent, guiding me back towards the bus. As I made my way through the clearing, the footprints reappeared, now leading me directly to the stranded vehicle. My heart raced as I realized that the spirits had been guiding me all along, leading me back to where the nightmare had begun. Inside the bus, I found a journal belonging to one of the missing passengers, detailing their descent into madness as the storm raged on. The final entry was a chilling account of encountering the mysterious figure in white and the overwhelming sense of being hunted by an unseen force. The journal ended abruptly, leaving me with more questions than answers. The realization hit me like a lightning bolt. Highway 666 was not just a road, but a conduit for restless spirits seeking to claim the living as their own. The winter ghost that haunted the highway was real, a malevolent presence that preyed on fear and despair, driving its victims to the brink of madness before extinguishing their lives in the cold embrace of the storm. With renewed determination, I gathered my courage and made one last attempt to restart the bus. The engine roared to life, and the wheels began to turn, slowly but surely breaking free from the snow's grip. As I drove away, the whispers and shadows faded into the distance, the storm's remnants dissolving into a peaceful silence. I never returned to Highway 666, the memories of that night etched into my very being. The loss of my friends and the encounter with the supernatural left me with a profound respect for the unknown forces that lie hidden within nature's most extreme environments. The legend of the winter ghost became a cautionary tale, a story of survival against insurmountable odds and the supernatural entities that guard the highway with an unforgiving ferocity. Years later, I still hear the whispers on cold winter nights, the echoes of lost souls carried by the wind, a reminder of the darkness that can consume even the bravest of spirits. The haunting legacy of Highway 666 serves as a testament to the enduring power of fear and the mysteries that lie just beyond the reach of our understanding. And so, I warn others. Heed the warnings of those who have walked this path before. Respect the power of nature, and understand that some roads lead to places best left unexplored. For in the heart of the wilderness, amidst the silent snow and the lingering shadows, lies a darkness that can consume even the strongest of spirits, leaving behind only echoes of fear and the eternal struggle for survival.